Hi there. Today we're traveling back to the 9th century, to a small, damp, and perpetually worried island on the edge of the known world. Imagine you're in a drafty wooden hall. The air is thick with wood smoke from a central fire pit stinging your eyes and catching in your throat. Bearded men in sweat-stained tunics roar with laughter, draining horns of ale and slamming them down on rough-hewn tables. This is your home. This is Wessex. And you are a prince named Alfred. Forget the grand tapestries and gilded thrones of fantasy. This is a world of mud leather and sharp steel where the average life expectancy makes a modern-day workplace safety video look like a vacation guide. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born in the year 849 in a royal estate in the town of Wantage. The world you enter is loud, visceral, and smells faintly of wet wool and manure. You are the 5th child and the 4th son of King Ethelwulf of Wessex. 4 older brothers stand between you and the throne: Ethelstan, Ethelbald, Ethelbert, and Ethelred. In the brutal calculus of royal succession, you are not just the spare. You are the spare's spare. Your job, for all intents and purposes, is to look decorative at feasts, not get in the way, and hope a stray Viking axe doesn't find you before you hit puberty. No one looks at you and sees a king. They see a small, quiet boy, more interested in the words of a visiting scholar than the boar-hunting stories of your father's warriors. And there's another reason you're overlooked. From your earliest memories, your life is punctuated by a secret, agonizing companion pain. It comes without warning, a sudden violent storm in your gut that leaves you doubled over, pale and sweating. One moment, you are listening to a Scapa court poet chant tales of heroes and dragons, and the next, you are desperately trying to hide the tremor in your hands as a fire poker stabs and twists its way through your insides. No one knows what it is. The court leeches, with their solemn expressions and dubious potions, offer prayers and herbal concoctions that do little more than make you gag. They whisper of elf shot, of demonic humors, of a divine punishment for some unknown sin. Modern historians, looking back through the hazy lens of a millennium, speculate it might have been Crohn's disease or another severe digestive ailment. For you, it has no name. It is simply the fire, a constant, unpredictable threat that isolates you in a world built on physical strength and martial prowess. While your brothers are outside learning to swing a sword and ride a war horse, you are often confined to your chambers, learning the geography of pain. This chronic illness is a mainstream historical fact mentioned clearly in the biography written by your own Bishop Asser. It shaped your entire existence. This physical vulnerability, however, sharpens your mind. You crave knowledge with a ferocity your healthier brothers reserve for battle. You cannot yet read a skill not considered essential for a warrior prince, but you have a remarkable memory. You are a sponge for the epic poems and psalms you hear in the Great Hall. This leads to one of the most famous stories of your youth. Your mother Osberth, a clever and pious woman, gathers you and your brothers. She holds up a beautifully illuminated manuscript of Saxon poetry, its pages rich with intricate knots and vibrant beasts. "I will give this book," she says, her voice cutting through the usual hall chatter, to whichever of you can learn it the fastest. Your older brothers, already young men focused on the arts of war, likely scoff at the challenge. It's just a book. But you, the small boy in the corner, see a universe in those pages. You take the book to a tutor and have him read it to you, again and again and again, until the rhythm of the words and the shape of the stories are burned into your mind. You return to your mother and recite the entire volume word for perfect word. The book is yours. Historians still argue whether this story was a fond family memory recorded by a loyal friend or a carefully crafted piece of royal propaganda to highlight your piety and wisdom from an early age. Either way, it paints a vivid picture, a boy who wins with his brain what he cannot take with his fists. But your intellect makes you an oddity. You live in a warrior culture. Your father, King Ethelwulf, is a deeply religious man, but he is also a fighter who secured his throne through bloodshed. Your brothers are much the same. They live in a world of shield walls, land grants, and loyalty oaths sworn over clashing swords. It's a bit like being the only chess club member in a family of rugby players. They love you in their own gruff way, but they don't entirely understand you. You watch them, these large, confident men, and you know you are different. You don't have their physical presence, their easy command of a room. When the Vikings raid the coast, which they do with terrifying frequency, your brothers ride out to meet them. You remain behind your stomach in knots from either fear or your relentless malady. Often, it's impossible to tell the difference. You feel the weight of your perceived inadequacy, a constant low hum beneath the surface of your life. You are a prince of the blood, yes, but you are a scholar in a land that needs swords, a thinker in a world that demands action. And as you lie awake at night, the pain in your gut, a dull echo of the chaos raging outside your kingdom's borders. You can't possibly imagine that the fate of your people, of the very idea of England, will one day rest entirely on your frail shoulders. Your father, King Ethelwulf, decides you need a change of scenery, a big one. Perhaps he sees your intellectual spark and thinks it needs fanning by the flames of Christendom's heart. Perhaps he's a worried father, hoping a divine blessing from the Pope himself might cure your mysterious ailment. Or perhaps in a cold moment of political calculation, he decides that sending his youngest, sickliest, and most strategically irrelevant son on an incredibly dangerous journey is a risk worth taking. Whatever his reasons, at the tender age of 4 or 5, you are told to pack your tiny tunic. You're going to Rome. This isn't a summer holiday. It's a 9th century pilgrimage, the equivalent of being strapped to a rocket and fired at the moon with a packed lunch. You are handed over to a retinue of solemn-faced nobles and priests who will be your guardians and guides on this epic trek across a fractured and dangerous Europe. First, there's the sea. You stand on the coast of Wessex, the salty wind whipping your hair, and watch the waves crash against the shore. The ship that awaits you is not a majestic vessel. It's a wooden, single-masted cog, smelling strongly of tar bilge water and fear. The crossing of the channel is brutal. The boat heaves and lurches on the gray, unforgiving water. For a boy whose stomach is already a battlefield, this is a special kind of hell. Every crest and fall of the waves feels like a personal insult from God. You are miserably sick, huddled under an oilskin praying for solid ground. Your guards are probably no better off, their warriors' bravado washed away by green-faced nausea. This is your first taste of the world beyond Wessex, and it tastes like salt and vomit. Once you land in Francia, the journey becomes a long, slow grind. You are a tiny figure in a vast procession, traveling on horseback and in wagons through the sprawling lands of the Frankish king Charles the Bald. The Roman roads are crumbling, and the rule of law is, let's call it, aspirational. Bandits are a constant threat, hiding in the dense forests that press in on either side of the road. Every evening, your party forms a defensive circle, the firelight glinting on nervous eyes and the hilts of swords. The journey is monotonous, a blur of dusty roads, suspicious innkeepers, and campsites in muddy fields. You pass through villages where people speak a tongue you don't understand, their faces a mixture of curiosity and distrust. There are no handy motorway service stations for a leg stretch and a snack. Every stop is a negotiation, every meal a potential source of another stomach-lurching sickness. You miss the familiar sounds and smells of home with an ache that is almost as sharp as the physical pain that still visits you in the night. Then come the Alps. For a boy raised in the gentle rolling hills of southern England, the sheer scale of the mountains is terrifying and awe-inspiring. They are a jagged wall of rock and ice scraping the sky. The air grows thin and cold, and the path becomes a treacherous ledge clinging to the side of a cliff. You look down into bottomless chasms and up at snow-capped peaks that seem to belong to another world. Your party abandons the wagons, and you travel on foot or by mule, a slow, freezing procession through a landscape of sublime indifference. This is a powerful lesson. You, a prince, are utterly insignificant in the face of nature's might. It's a lesson in humility, etched into your memory by frozen fingers and burning lungs. Finally, after months of travel, you arrive in Rome. But this is not the gleaming marble city of Augustus. The Rome of the 9th century is a ghost of its former self. The magnificent Forum is now the Campo Vaccino, the cow field, where livestock graze amongst the shattered columns of fallen temples. The Colosseum stands as a colossal broken tooth, its stones being plundered for other buildings. You see beggars and goat herds living in the ruins of imperial palaces. It's a city of profound melancholy, a sprawling monument to the fact that even the greatest empires eventually crumble to dust. Yet, it is still the heart of your world. It is the city of St. Peter, the bedrock of your faith. This is a mainstream historical fact. You arrived just a few years after the city was attacked. In 846, Arab raiders had sailed up the Tiber, sacked the basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul outside the old Aurelian walls, and desecrated the holy sites. The fear is still fresh. In response, the reigning pontiff, Pope Leo IV, is frantically constructing a massive new wall to protect the Vatican Hill. You can probably see the construction as you arrive, a frantic effort to keep the dangers of the world at bay. You are cleaned up, dressed in your finest clothes, and brought before the Pope. The ceremony is a bewildering spectacle for a child. You walk through halls filled with richly robed clerics, the air thick with the sweet, heavy smell of incense. You hear the chant of Latin, a holy language you've heard but never understood. Pope Leo IV, an imposing figure of immense spiritual authority, performs a ceremony. He anoints you, marking you with holy oil. One quirky and often misunderstood tidbit is what this actually meant. Later chronicles written to burnish your legend would claim the Pope foresaw your destiny and consecrated you as a future king. This is almost certainly not true. You had 3, nearly 4, living older brothers. Historians still argue whether this was a prophetic act or simply a standard diplomatic courtesy extended to a visiting prince, perhaps naming you an honorary Roman consul. For you in that moment, the political meaning is irrelevant. You are a small, sick boy, a long, long way from home, being blessed by the most powerful spiritual man on earth. It's an experience that burrows deep into your soul, solidifying a faith that will become your anchor in the storms to come. And after all that, you have to turn around and make the entire exhausting, terrifying journey all over again to get home. You can only hope your frequent flyer miles will carry over. You return to Wessex from your Roman holiday, fundamentally changed. You've seen the grandeur of ancient empires and the heart of your faith, while your brothers have been at home, learning how to cleave a helmet in two. The distance between you and them, once a matter of temperament, is now a gulf of experience. They see you as the odd, quiet one who came back from his trip with a papal blessing and a strange look in his eye. You, in turn, see your homeland as smaller, more fragile, and terribly vulnerable. You have seen the walls of Rome, and you know the wooden palisades of your father's halls are not the same. This feeling of precariousness will prove to be brutally prophetic. The family business you are about to discover is dying, and business is booming. Your eldest brother Ethelstan, who had ruled the sub-kingdom of Kent, is the first to go. He vanishes from the historical record around the year 852, likely dying of illness or in some unrecorded skirmish. You were too young to know him well, but his absence sets a grim tone. One brother down. Then in 858, your father, King Ethelwulf, dies. The crown of Wessex passes to your next brother, Ethelbald. His reign gets off to what can only be described as an awkward start. In a move that scandalized the kingdom and sent churchmen into a sputtering rage, he marries his own stepmother, the Frankish princess Judith. She was your father's teenage bride, and now she is your brother's. Family gatherings must have been a little tense. This is a quirky but true piece of 9th century drama that highlights the chaotic mix of piety and power politics of the age. Ethelbald's controversial reign is, however, mercifully short. He dies in 860 after only 2 years as king. You are just a boy of 11, and you have now attended the funerals of 2 of your brothers. The crown passes to the next in line, Ethelbert. He unites Kent and Wessex under a single rule, and for 5 years he does his best to hold the kingdom together. But the dark tide from the north is rising. Every year the longships come. At first they were summer raiders, content to sack a monastery, steal its gold, and vanish back across the sea. But the nature of the threat is changing. In 865, the year of Ethelbert's death, the game is reset completely. A massive fleet appears off the coast of East Anglia. This is no mere raiding party. This is the Mysel Hethen, here the great heathen army. This is a mainstream historical fact that marks the beginning of the end for half of England's kingdoms. Led by the legendary sons of Ragnar Lothbrok men with names like Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan Ragnarsson, this is an invasion force. They don't want to just rob England, they want to conquer it. That same year, your third brother Ethelbert dies. No one is entirely sure how, but the timing is terrible. The family's life insurance premiums must be going through the roof at this point. 3 brothers gone. Suddenly all eyes turn to Ethelred, your last surviving older brother. He is king now, and you at 16 are his designated heir, his secondarius. There is no more hiding in the library. There is no more being the quiet, sickly spare. You are now second in command of a kingdom facing an existential threat. The great heathen army spends a few years smashing the northern kingdoms of Northumbria and East Anglia to pieces. You and Ethelred watch from Wessex knowing your time is coming. In 870, it does. The Vikings wheel south, and the war for Wessex begins. The year that follows is one of brutal, relentless fighting. You are no longer the boy with a book. You are a young man in a mail shirt, standing shoulder to shoulder with your brother in the terrifying chaos of a shield wall. This is the front line of 9th century warfare. It's a pushing, shoving, stabbing match of unimaginable violence. Imagine a rugby scrum, but with spears, axes, and swords. You are locked shield to shield with the men beside you, your world reduced to the enemy warrior in front of you, the stench of sweat and blood in your nostrils, the deafening roar of war cries, and the clang of steel on wood and bone. You and Ethelred lead the West Saxon army in at least 9 major battles in a single year. You win a stunning victory at the Battle of Ashdown, where you are said to have led a desperate uphill charge against a Viking division while your brother was busy finishing his prayers. It's a heroic moment, but the victories don't last. The Vikings have numbers and a terrifying ferocity. For every one you kill, 2 more seem to take his place. Then comes the Battle of Merton. During the fight, Ethelred is struck down. He is gravely wounded. Historians still argue about the exact cause of your brother's deaths, whether from battle wounds sustained at places like Merton, or from disease that festered in the aftermath, or simply from the sheer grinding stress of command. But the result was always the same. A few weeks after the battle, in the spring of 871, your final brother dies. You are 21 years old. You have watched all 4 of your older brothers assume the burdens of the crown. You have watched each of them in turn be consumed by it. The throne of Wessex is not a prize. It is not an honor. It is a poisoned chalice, a death sentence with a fancy title. And now it is being offered to you. Your brother is dead. The warriors are exhausted. Their shields splintered, their mail shirts rent and bloody. The Viking army, a beast that has devoured every other English kingdom, is camped so close you can almost smell their cook fires on the evening wind. And in this moment of supreme crisis, the surviving nobles of Wessex, the council known as the Witan, turn their weary, fearful eyes to you. There is no grand coronation. There is no cheering crowd, no celebratory feast. There is just a hurried, desperate meeting in a royal hall that still echoes with your brother's final pained breaths. They need a king, and you're it. Surprise. The crown they place on your head feels less like an honor and more like a lead weight. It's a job you were never supposed to have, a responsibility you've inherited through death and desperation. And there's a complication, a pretty significant one. Your dead brother Ethelred has 2 young sons, Ethelhelm and Ethelwold. By the logic of a stable, peaceful kingdom, one of them should be king. But this is not a stable, peaceful kingdom. A core tenet of Anglo-Saxon kingship and a mainstream historical fact is that succession was not automatically granted to the eldest son. The Witan had the right and the duty to choose the best candidate from the royal bloodline, the one most capable of leading the tribe. And right now, the tribe needs a warrior, not a regent ruling for a child. Your father's own will had stipulated that his sons should inherit the kingdom in sequence, a legal framework that makes your accession legitimate. But it feels less like a smooth transition and more like an emergency seizure of power. You are, in effect, taking the throne from your own nephews. You look at their small, confused faces at their father's funeral and feel a pang of guilt, another weight to add to the crushing burden on your shoulders. You inherit a kingdom on the verge of total collapse. The West Saxon army, the Third, is a shadow of its former self. It has been bled white by the year of battles. Your men are brave, but they are also farmers and landowners, not professional soldiers. They are tired of fighting, tired of dying. They want to go home and tend to their fields, not face another Viking shield wall. The royal treasury is empty, bled dry by the relentless costs of war. Villages have been looted, monasteries sacked, and trade disrupted. The economy is a wreck. And worst of all is the psychological damage. A creeping sense of hopelessness has taken root among your people. The Vikings seem like a force of nature, an unstoppable plague sent by a wrathful god. They have shattered Northumbria, conquered East Anglia, and reduced the once mighty kingdom of Mercia to a puppet state. Wessex is the last one. You are the last Saxon king of any consequence left standing south of the Humber. No pressure. You don't get a single day to ease into the job. There is no orientation week, no new king welcome basket. Within a month of your brother's funeral, you have to rally your weary troops for another fight. The Vikings are still here, and they want to finish the job. You lead your army to a place called Wilton. You are the king now. The final decisions rest with you. You give the speeches, you draw the battle lines in the dirt, and you try to project an aura of confidence you absolutely do not feel. For a moment, it looks like it might work. Your troops charge, and the Viking line bends. A surge of hope, perhaps. But the Vikings are masters of deception. They feign a retreat, a classic tactic. Your men eager for a decisive victory break formation, and surge forward in a chaotic pursuit. It's a trap. The Vikings turn regroup and slaughter your disorganized soldiers. You have been king for less than a month, and you have just presided over a bloody, humiliating defeat. Your reign is off to a roaring start, if by roaring you mean the sound of a massive fire consuming everything you hold dear. And through all this, your old unwelcome companion is still with you. The fire in your gut doesn't care that you're wearing a crown. The immense stress, the fear, the physical exertion of battle, it's the perfect recipe for a flare-up of your chronic illness. Imagine trying to make tactical decisions to rally panicked men while a red-hot poker is twisting in your intestines. The pain is so intense, it's hard to think, hard to breathe. You have to mask it, of course. You cannot show weakness. Not now. Not ever. The king must be a pillar of strength, even if that pillar is crumbling from the inside out. Historians still argue about the details of your accession. Was the decision to pass over your nephews unanimous and immediate, or was there a tense period of negotiation among the terrified nobles who saw you as their only hope? What isn't up for debate is the result. You are king of a broken kingdom, leader of a beaten army, and master of a body that has declared war on itself. You stand on the field at Wilton, surrounded by the dead and dying the setting sun, casting long shadows over your first great failure as king. This is your inheritance, a legacy of dead brothers, and a kingdom one battle away from annihilation. The field at Wilton is quiet now, save for the groans of the wounded and the grim work of the burial parties. Your first battle as king has been a catastrophe, and your army is broken. The surviving nobles look at you, their faces etched with fear. They know, and you know, that if the Vikings press their advantage now, it's all over. Wessex will fall, just like Northumbria, just like East Anglia. Your military options have been reduced to precisely zero. You have only one card left to play, and it's a humiliating one. You have to ask them to name their price. You, the anointed king of the West Saxons, must sue for peace. This means paying the Danegeld. It's a simple, brutal concept that has become the curse of the English kingdoms. When you can't beat the Vikings in a fight, you pay them to go away. It's the 9th century equivalent of handing your lunch money over to the school bully every single day, except the bully has an axe and is threatening to burn down your house with your family inside. This payment is a well-documented mainstream historical fact, and it represents the absolute nadir of your authority. Your first major act as king will not be a great victory or a wise law. It will be a national humiliation. First, you have to find the money. The royal treasury is just a collection of dust bunnies and IOUs after the endless warfare. So you have to tax your own suffering people. You send your men out to every corner of your shattered kingdom, demanding a contribution. Farmers who have already had their livestock stolen and their barns burned now have to give up their last silver coins. Then you turn to the church. This must feel like a dagger thrust to your own pious heart. Remember that boy who journeyed to Rome, who loved psalms and cherished illuminated manuscripts. You are now that boy's worst nightmare. You have to walk into your kingdom's monasteries and churches, places of sanctuary and prayer, and order your men to strip them of their treasures. Golden chalices, silver crucifixes, jeweled book covers. Anything of value is taken, destined not for the glory of God, but to line the pockets of pagan invaders. You can feel the silent accusation in the eyes of the abbots and priests as they watch you desecrate their holy places out of sheer desperate necessity. The negotiation itself is a festival of shame. You don't go yourself. The risk is too great. But your envoys meet with the Viking leaders. You can picture the scene, your grim-faced nobles standing before the smirking, confident chieftains of the great heathen army. The Vikings are arrogant, lounging on furs and drinking from stolen goblets, their weapons always in hand. They hold all the power, and they know it. They name an obscene price in gold and silver. There is no haggling. Your men simply have to agree. Historians still argue about the precise terms of this payment. Was it a one-off sum, or more like the first installment of a tribute agreement? Did it involve just money, or were you also forced to hand over high-born hostages as collateral? The specifics are lost to time, but the meaning is crystal clear. You are a subordinate. You are paying for their mercy. Then comes the logistical nightmare of the payment itself. This isn't a neat bank transfer. This is a physical mountain of wealth. The quirky, agonizing tidbit is in the detail. You have to gather all that plundered church plate, all those farmers' coins, and melt it down into silver ingots. Then you have to transport this immense treasure to the Viking camp and watch as they weigh it out piece by painful piece. Every clink of silver on their scales is an echo of your defeat. It's a slow, deliberate, and public display of your kingdom's submission. Once the last coin is counted, the Vikings, true to their word, agree to leave Wessex for a little while. They pack up their camp and march off to spend the winter in London, which is in the neighboring kingdom of Mercia. They'll use your silver to rest, resupply, and recruit more warriors. You've essentially just funded their next vacation and their future campaigns against you. It's like paying for a subscription to the Viking-free Wessex service. But you know the introductory offer is about to expire. A strange, hollow quiet descends on your kingdom. The immediate threat is gone, but there is no sense of relief. You've bought peace, but you've sold your pride to get it. Your authority as a war leader is in tatters. Your people have seen you fail to protect them, Your own conscience gnaws at you for raiding the houses of God. You stand on a hill and watch the long column of the great heathen army snake its way out of your lands, not with a feeling of victory, but with the cold, certain dread of a man who has just been told his fatal disease is in remission, but that it will be back. And it will be worse. You have bought yourself time. That is all the Danegeld has given you. Now, in this borrowed fragile peace, you have to figure out a way to become the king. Your people need a king who can fight, not just a king who can pay. The clock is ticking. For a few years, a tense, fragile peace settles over Wessex. You paid the Danegeld, and the great heathen army, led by a canny warlord named Guthrum, has been busy elsewhere, breaking the back of your neighboring kingdom Mercia and consolidating their power in the north. You use this borrowed time to govern, to try and mend the seams of your tattered kingdom. You marry, have children, and perhaps even allow a flicker of hope to warm you on cold nights. Maybe they have enough land and plunder now. Maybe they will leave you alone. You've had 5 years of this uneasy quiet. It is the winter of 878. The kingdom is celebrating Christmas and the feast of the Epiphany. The third your citizen army has been stood down for the season, its soldiers home with their families. It is a time of peace, of faith, of rest, which makes it the perfect time for a surprise party. And Guthrum is the host. In a shocking breach of all the established rules of war, Guthrum launches a full-scale invasion of Wessex in the dead of winter. This is a mainstream historical fact that still has the power to shock. He attacked on Twelfth Night, a holy day. It's a lightning strike, a 9th century blitzkrieg, aimed directly at the heart of your kingdom. He isn't raiding the coast. He storms inland and seizes your royal estate at Chippenham, a major administrative and symbolic center. He catches everyone completely by surprise. With the army demobilized, there is no shield wall to meet them. The kingdom doesn't just bend, it shatters. In a matter of weeks, Wessex, the last proud Saxon kingdom, collapses into chaos. Local lords either flee, submit, or are killed. The Vikings rampage through your lands unopposed. You are the #1 target on their list. You are at Chippenham when they attack, and you are forced to flee for your life with nothing but the clothes on your back and a handful of loyal housecarls, your personal bodyguards. One moment you are a king in his hall. The next, you are a fugitive hunted in your own land. Every road is blocked, every town occupied. The entire structure of your kingdom has evaporated. Where do you go when the world you ruled has ceased to exist? You go where an army cannot easily follow. You run to the swamps. You vanish into the great morass of the Somerset levels. This is not a strategic retreat. It's a desperate dive into hiding. The levels are a vast watery labyrinth of marshes, bogs, fens, and small tree-covered islands that barely rise above the stagnant water. The air is permanently damp, thick with mist and the buzzing of insects. The ground beneath your feet is a treacherous lie, solid one moment and a sucking, muddy trap the next. This is your new kingdom. Your palace is a hastily built shelter of woven branches. Your royal diet now consists of whatever you and your few remaining followers can catch. You learn to fish for eels in the murky water, to hunt for waterfowl, to forage for edible roots and plants. This isn't just uncomfortable. For you, it must be agony. Remember your chronic illness. The constant seeping cold and a diet of swamp-to-table cuisine would be a special kind of torture for your already rebellious gut. This is without a doubt the worst camping trip in human history. The psychological toll is immense. You are stripped of everything that made you a king. The crown, the throne, the army, the kingdom itself, all gone. You are reduced to a common outlaw, huddled with a few desperate men around a smoky fire on a miserable patch of damp earth. The despair must be a physical weight. You look at your ragged companions, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear, and you must wonder if this is it. Is this how the story of the House of Wessex ends? Not with a bang and a glorious last stand, but with a whimper shivering in a bog. The memory of being blessed by the Pope in the splendors of Rome must feel like a bizarre fever dream from another man's life. From this state of utter destitution, a tiny spark of resistance begins. You find a defensible island deep within the marshes called Athelney. A quirky little tidbit of linguistic irony, the name Athelney in Old English means the Isle of Princes. This muddy, miserable lump of land is the last scrap of your royal domain. Here on the Isle of Princes, you build a small hidden fort. It's little more than a wooden stockade and a few huts, but it is a base. From Athelney, you begin to wage a one-man war. You and your small band become guerrilla fighters, emerging from the mists to ambush Viking patrols and supply lines, then melting back into the swamp before they can retaliate. It's desperate small-scale stuff, but it's something. It's a message to the invaders and to your own subjugated people that you are still alive. Historians still argue about how complete the Viking conquest of Wessex was at this point. Was all organized resistance truly extinguished except for your small band? Or were other pockets of defiance holding out, inspired by the knowledge that their king was still alive somewhere out there in the marshes? Either way, your survival is the last flickering candle in a great darkness. You have lost everything, but as long as you can breathe the misty air of this swamp, the fight isn't over. Life in your swampy fortress of Athelney grinds on. The days are a monotonous cycle of damp, misty dawns and long, cold nights. You are a king with no subjects to rule, no hall to feast in, and no bed to sleep in that doesn't feel like a wet sponge. You and your small band of followers are bound by loyalty, but also by shared misery. The mood is tense, broken only by the small successes of your guerrilla raids and the constant gnawing hunger. The fire in your gut still rages, a painful internal mirror of the chaos that has consumed your kingdom. In this state of profound despair, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, you are about to have your most famous and perhaps most embarrassing moment. The story, which has become a cornerstone of your legend, begins on a day like any other. Perhaps you are out on a scouting mission, or maybe you have simply wandered away from the small fort, seeking a moment of solitude to wrestle with your monumental failures. You are alone, lost in a fog of worry, your clothes ragged, your face thin and bearded. You are utterly unrecognizable as the King of Wessex. You stumble upon a small, isolated hut, the home of a swineherd, one of the many common folk whose lives have been upended by the invasion. Seeking a moment of warmth, you enter. Inside, the swineherd's wife is busy, her hands constantly moving, her face a mask of weary resilience. She sees you not as a king, but as just another wretched refugee, a vagrant with sad eyes and an empty stomach. She takes pity on you, this strange, silent man, and allows you to sit by her hearth, a small fire pit, where a few simple cakes, little loaves of bread, really are baking on hot stones. She has other chores to attend to, and seeing you sitting there doing nothing, she gives you a simple task. "Watch these cakes, man," she says, her voice sharp with preoccupation. Make sure you turn them. I don't want them to burn. A simple enough instruction for a man who has commanded armies. But your mind is not on the simple hearth. It is 1,000 miles away in the ruins of your kingdom. As you stare into the flickering flames, you are not seeing the baking bread. You are seeing the Viking longships on the horizon. You are seeing the terrified faces of your people. You are wrestling with God, demanding to know why you have been brought so low, why your pious family and your Christian kingdom have been abandoned to these pagan wolves. You are weighing the sins of your people against the wrath of the Almighty. You are strategizing, despairing, praying. You are doing the lonely, agonizing work of a defeated king. The one thing you are not doing is paying any attention whatsoever to the cakes. The smell of burning slowly begins to fill the small, smoky hut. The woman returns, and her senses are not clouded by existential dread. They are focused on the family's next meal, which you have just successfully incinerated. She sees the charred, blackened lumps on the hearth. She looks at you, the useless lumps sitting next to them, and she explodes. She unleashes a torrent of abuse, the righteous fury of a hard-working person whose precious efforts have been ruined by a lazy fool. "You useless oaf!" she screeches, prodding you with a stick, or perhaps just her sharp words. You can see they're on fire. You couldn't be bothered to turn them, but you'll be quick enough to want to eat them. You, Alfred, son of Ethelwulf, king of the West, Saxons anointed in Rome by the Pope himself, are being given the performance review of a lifetime by an angry peasant woman. There is nothing you can say. She is in this moment completely and utterly right. You have failed in your one simple duty. This incident is perhaps the most famous story about you, a mainstream historical fact of your legend, if not of your life. Historians have long debated whether the cake story actually happened. It's not mentioned by your contemporary biographer Asser, but appears in stories about you written a century or so later. Is it a true, deeply embarrassing anecdote that was passed down because it was so human? Or is it a carefully constructed parable, a piece of religious folklore, created to teach a lesson? The quirky tidbit here is how the story was likely intended to be heard as a lesson in humility. It shows that a king lost in his great and holy concerns for his kingdom can still be useless at the humble practical tasks that sustain life. It's a story designed to show that you had to be brought to the absolute bottom, stripped of all pride before you could rise again. In that moment, standing in the smoky hut, the smell of burnt bread filling your nostrils, you are not a king. You are not a scholar. You are not a warrior. You are just a man who couldn't be trusted with baking. It is the ultimate humiliation, a fall from grace so complete it's almost comical. You have hit rock bottom, and from here, there is only one way to go. The shame of the burnt cakes, whether a literal event or a powerful allegory, serves as the flint against the steel of your will. The period of hiding, of wallowing in the cold mud of despair is over. A new hard resolve settles in your heart. You have been humbled. You have been stripped of everything. Now you will fight back, not with petty raids from the swamp, but with an army. The only problem is you don't have one. And the entire kingdom is an enemy-occupied territory. It's time to get creative. You cannot simply ride out of the swamp with a banner and expect soldiers to flock to you. Guthrum's forces are everywhere. Any open attempt to raise an army would be crushed before it even began. Your only weapon is secrecy. From your damp island fortress of Athelney, You begin to spin a web. You summon your most trusted Thens, the handful of loyal warriors who have shared your exile. They are to become your secret messengers, your ghost-like envoys to a kingdom that thinks you are dead. Their task is one of immense peril. They must slip out of the Somerset levels, traveling by night, moving through ancient woodlands and forgotten tracks, their ears constantly straining for the sound of a Viking patrol. Their lives depend on not being seen. This isn't a postal service with a tracking number. If your messengers disappear, you'll never know if they were caught or simply vanished into the wilderness. Their destinations are the shires of Wessex, that while subjugated, are not entirely under Guthrum's thumb, Somerset, Wiltshire, and parts of Hampshire. Their mission is to find the local ealdormen and reeves, the powerful nobles and officials who command the local militias. These are men you have known your whole life, men who swore oaths of loyalty to you and your brothers. But are those oaths still valid? Do they believe you are still alive? Your messenger arrives at a fortified homestead. In the dead of night, a shadowy figure whispering a password to a nervous sentry. He is brought before the lord of the estate, and in the flickering torchlight presents a token, your royal seal perhaps, or repeats a phrase only you and the nobleman would know. The message they carry is simple, and it is electrifying. The king lives. The message is a command: gather your forces, every man able to wield a spear or an axe. Tell them to be ready. You give them a time and a place. In 7 weeks, they are to muster. They are to march to a rendezvous point known as Ecgbert's Stone. This secret call to arms is the mainstream historical fact that underpins your entire comeback. It's an audacious, desperate gamble. You are asking these men to commit open treason against their new Viking overlords on the word of a ghost. If they obey, and the plan is discovered, Guthrum will unleash hell upon their lands and their families. While you wait for your gamble to pay off, you forge the core of your new army, the men who have been with you in the swamp. They are no longer the king's guard in shiny mail. They are a different breed of warrior now. They are gaunt, hardened, and masters of the terrain. They know how to move silently, how to live off the land, how to kill without hesitation. They are your special forces, your grizzled veterans. They will be the backbone of the army you hope is coming. You are no longer just the scholar king. Your time in the wilderness has made you a guerrilla chief, and your men reflect that. They have a new kind of loyalty to you, not just as their king, but as the man who starved and shivered alongside them in the mud. Historians still argue about how you managed to maintain the loyalty of the wider nobility after such a total collapse. Was it the deeply ingrained Germanic tradition of fealty to a sworn lord, an oath that held true even when you had nothing to offer in return? Or was it their shared Christian identity, a powerful glue that bound them together against the pagan invaders who desecrated their churches? The quirky tidbit might lie in your choice of a meeting place. The exact location of Ecgbert's Stone is now lost, but it was almost certainly a well-known ancient landmark, likely a prehistoric standing stone or barrow. In an age steeped in symbolism, choosing such a place was a stroke of genius. It wasn't just a random spot on a map, a spot for which there was no map, by the way. It was a place that tapped into a deep, ancestral sense of place and identity, a call to the very soul of Wessex. The messengers are gone. The call has been sent. Now, all you can do is wait. You sit in your smoky hut on the Isle of Princes cleaning your sword, your mind a whirlwind of hope and terror. You have thrown the dice. In a few weeks, you will march to Ecgbert's Stone. But who will be there waiting for you? Will you find the might of 3 shires, a great army of Saxons ready for one last desperate fight? Or will you find only a handful of terrified men, or worse, a legion of Viking warriors waiting in ambush? Absolutely everything hangs on the answer. You lead your small company of swamp fighters out of the misty wetlands of Athelney. For 2 days, you march your heart a knot of hope and dread. You have no idea what awaits you at the rendezvous point. As you approach Ecgber's stone, you hear a low rumble on the air. It's not the sound of a Viking army lying in wait. It's the sound of thousands of men. Cresting a hill you see them. The Fyrds, the militias of Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire have answered your call. A great sea of West Saxons, armed with spears and round shields, stands waiting for their king. As they see you, their king, who they thought was dead, a great roar goes up. Asser, your biographer, would later write that they received you as if resurrected from the dead. It's less a military muster and more a profoundly emotional, near-religious reunion. For the first time in months, you are not a fugitive. You are a king at the head of an army. There is no time for celebration. Guthrum will have heard of this gathering. The element of surprise, your greatest weapon, has a very short fuse. You give your soldiers 1 night of rest, and then you begin to march. You are on the offensive, now pushing your new army hard and fast towards Guthrum's main base at Chippenham. News of your approach flies through the countryside. Guthrum, who likely thought you were a non-entity shivering in a bog, is stunned. He has 2 choices: let himself be penned up and besieged in his fortress, or march out and meet you in open battle to crush this rebellion once and for all. A proud and successful warlord, he chooses the latter. He gathers the best of his great heathen army and marches out to meet you. The final winner-take-all showdown for the future of England will take place near a town called Edington. The morning of the battle dawns bright and clear. The 2 armies deploy facing each other across a sloping field. You see the raven banners of the Vikings, the symbols that have brought terror to this land for years. You look along your own lines at the determined faces of farmers, blacksmiths, and landowners, the men of Wessex. You ride before them, your voice ringing out, reminding them why they are here. They are not fighting for pay or for plunder. They are fighting for their hlaford and for their ham, for their lord and for their homes. They are fighting for the right to plow their own fields and pray to their own God. Then, with horns blaring, you give the command to advance. What happens next is the brutal, definitive set piece of your age, the clash of shield walls. This is the mainstream historical fact of the Battle of Edington. Imagine 2 solid walls of men, shields interlocked spears, bristling outwards, crashing into each other with the force of a tidal wave. The sound is a deafening concussion of wood on wood, metal on wood, and then the sickening crunch of metal on bone. The battle becomes a monstrous pushing match, a human meat grinder that goes on for hour after painful hour. Your world shrinks to the man in front of you, his snarling face seen over the rim of your shield. You thrust with your spear, you hack with your sword, you shove with all your might. The press is so tight you can barely breathe. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and sheer terror. You are not a general on a hill. You are in the thick of it, your shield taking blows, your arm burning with fatigue, fighting shoulder to shoulder with your people. Your survival and their hope are one and the same. Historians still argue about the exact size of the armies at Edington. Were they thousands strong on each side, or perhaps only many hundreds. The chronicles are vague on numbers. The quirky tidbit, however, is the sheer psychological fortitude required. A shield wall is a collective test of will. It holds only as long as every man in it believes it will hold. For hours, neither side gives way. It is a stalemate of exhaustion and blood. But your men are fighting with the desperate fury of those with everything to lose. The Vikings, perhaps grown complacent from years of easy victories, are fighting only for a foreign conquest. And slowly, imperceptibly, at first the Viking line begins to buckle. A shield splinters, a man falls back, and a gap appears. Your warriors surge into the breach. The Viking shield wall, that seemingly invincible formation, shatters. Panic cascades through their ranks. They turn and they run. The battle becomes a rout. Your army, sensing total victory, pursues the fleeing Vikings with a vengeance, cutting them down as they scramble for safety. Guthrum himself, along with the remnants of his best warriors, manages to escape the slaughter and flee back to their fortress at Chippenham. But you do not let them rest. You follow them, and instead of attempting a costly assault, you surround the fort. You begin a siege. You strip the entire surrounding countryside of anything edible, livestock, grain, anything. No food gets into the fortress. Guthrum and his men are trapped. A few short weeks ago, you were the one starving in a swamp, a king of nothing. Now you stand outside the walls of your enemy's last stronghold, your victorious army at your back. The great Guthrum, the conqueror of kingdoms, is now the one who is cornered, starving and listening for the footsteps of a ghost who came back from the dead. For 2 weeks, the siege of Chippenham grinds on. Your victorious army forms a tight ring around the Viking fortress, and you wait. Inside, your mortal enemy, Guthrum, and the last of his great army are trapped. The thrill of victory gives way to the grim business of starving your enemy into submission. For the Vikings, the situation is dire. They have no hope of rescue, and their food supplies have run out. Your biographer Asser, writing with no small amount of satisfaction, notes that they were thoroughly terrified by hunger, cold, and fear. After 14 days of this misery, a white flag appears above the battlements. Guthrum, the man who had brought your kingdom to its knees, sends out envoys to beg for peace. He surrenders unconditionally. This is the moment of your ultimate triumph. The Viking army is utterly at your mercy. Your warriors, their faces grim, heft their axes and look at you awaiting the order. They are expecting a bloodbath, a righteous execution of the men who killed their kin and ravaged their lands. This is your chance to eradicate the Viking leadership in Wessex once and for all. And you do something that leaves everyone, your own men included, completely baffled. You offer Guthrum peace, but with a condition so strange, so personal, it is almost unbelievable. You demand that Guthrum, the pagan warlord, must not only leave Wessex forever, but he must also accept Christian baptism. And in a move of breathtaking psychological audacity, you declare that you, Alfred, will be his godfather. This is not an act of soft-hearted forgiveness. It is one of the shrewdest political moves of your entire life, and a mainstream historical fact that defines your victory. In your world, a simple treaty can be broken. Oaths sworn to foreign gods mean nothing. But a baptismal vow that is an oath sworn directly to the Christian God, the most powerful and binding promise a person could make. By forcing Guthrum into this sacrament, you are attempting to bind him with spiritual chains far stronger than any iron fetters. Furthermore, by becoming his godfather, You are symbolically recasting your relationship. In ninth century culture, a godfather held a position of superior authority and paternal responsibility. You are not just defeating your enemy, you are adopting him. You are making him your spiritual subordinate, your son in Christ. It is a power play so profound that Guthrum, seeing no other way to save himself and his men, agrees. The ceremony must have been one of the most awkward social events of the ninth century. Guthrum and 30 of his most important chieftains are escorted from the stench of their besieged fort to your royal villa at Aller. Here, the man whose army recently burned churches is dressed in a simple white baptismal robe. He stands before the font, dripping with holy water as your priests conduct the solemn rite. You stand beside him as his sponsor, your hand on his shoulder, a look of pious gravity on your face. It must have felt completely surreal, like the punchline to a very long and violent joke. Was it the world's weirdest bring your enemy to church day, perhaps? As part of the ceremony, Guthrum is given a new Christian name. And in a final potent twist of the knife, he is named Ethelstan, the same name as your own long-dead eldest brother. Of course, historians still argue about Guthrum's sincerity. Was this a genuine conversion on the road to Chippenham, a moment where he became convinced that your God was stronger than his? Or was he a stone-cold pragmatist, cynically mumbling prayers to save his skin, already planning his next move? We will never know. The quirky tidbit is what happens next. The baptism isn't the end of it. To seal the deal, you throw a 12-day party. You bring Guthrum now, Ethelstan, and his chieftains to another of your estates at Wedmore, and you host a lavish feast. For 12 days, you shower your former enemies with rich food, drink, and magnificent gifts. This wasn't just a celebration. It was a crucial part of the peace process. You were performing the role of a generous and powerful lord, showing your new godson the immense benefits of being on your good side. This period of feasting and ceremony culminates in the Treaty of Wedmore. The agreement formalizes the new reality you have created. Guthrum and his people will leave Wessex for good. They will settle in East Anglia, the kingdom they had already conquered. A formal border is established, running up the River Thames, along the River Lee, and up to Bedford, before following the old Roman road of Watling Street. This effectively divides England in two. South and west of the line is your Wessex. North and east of it becomes a Viking territory known to history as the Danelaw. You watch as Guthrum and his army finally march out of your kingdom. You have not just won a battle, you have won the war. You have secured your borders and neutralized your most dangerous foe using a bizarre cocktail of violence theology and political theater. But as the dust settles, you are left with a new daunting reality. You are the undisputed king of the Saxons, but half of England is now ruled by the man you just adopted. The last of Guthrum's army has marched out of Wessex. The Raven banners are gone. A profound, almost unnatural quiet settles over the land. You have won. You have secured a peace that seemed impossible just a few months ago. But as you ride through your kingdom, the taste of victory turns to ash in your mouth. Winning the war you are about to discover was the easy part. Now you have to rebuild a civilization from its own ruins, and the task is so monumental it makes the shield wall at Eddington look like a minor inconvenience. This is a new kind of suffering, the slow, grinding, thankless toil of reconstruction. Your kingdom is a wasteland. Towns that were once bustling centers of trade are now heaps of charred timber and rubble. Royal villas like your own at Chippenham have been looted and fouled. The great stone churches and monasteries, the pride of Wessex, stand as hollowed-out roofless shells, their sacred relics stolen, their altars overturned. The fields lie fallow and overgrown with weeds, because the men who should be plowing them are lying in shallow graves, or are still too haunted by the chaos to return to the rhythms of the land. The economy has ceased to exist. Your own currency is a mess, the silver content of coins having been debased over years of crisis. One of your first and most essential tasks, a mainstream historical fact of your reign, is to issue new high-quality silver pennies stamped with your image, a tangible symbol that order and value are returning to the world. It's a start, but it's like trying to fill a river with a teaspoon. Beyond the physical ruin is the damage you cannot see. Your people are deeply traumatized. For years they have lived in a state of constant terror. An entire generation has grown up knowing nothing but war and the fear of the longships. There is a crisis of faith that shakes you to your core. Your people and you yourself believe the Viking scourge was a punishment from God. But why, the answer you conclude is ignorance. A profound, soul-destroying ignorance that has settled over the land like a physical blight. You look at your clergy, the spiritual shepherds of your people, and you are horrified by what you find. In your own words, written later, you lament that when you came to the throne, there were very few men south of the river Humber who could even understand the Latin of their own church services, let alone translate a letter from Latin into English. This intellectual desert is a personal affront to you, the boy who won a book of poetry through sheer memory. You believe that wisdom and knowledge are essential for a kingdom's salvation, both spiritually and practically. A kingdom of fools cannot prosper, and it cannot please God. So you embark on one of the most ambitious projects of your reign. You decide to reboot the entire intellectual life of your country. Since there are no scholars left in Wessex, you'll have to import them. You essentially become the head of an international recruitment agency for brainiacs. You send out envoys to other parts of Britain and across the Channel to Francia, looking for the best and the brightest. You promise them wealth security and a starring role in your great project of renewal. Think of it as a 9th century scholars in residence program with better land grants. This leads to the quirky tidbit of imagining the sales pitch. You have to convince a learned man like Grimbald, a respected scholar from a great Frankish monastery, to leave the heart of European civilization and move to your damp, foggy, recently pillaged island on the absolute edge of the known world. It's like trying to convince a top professor to leave a prestigious university for a startup being run out of a garage in a bad neighborhood. You succeed through a combination of lavish promises and the sheer force of your own passion for the project. You manage to gather a small but brilliant circle of scholars at your court, including a Welshman named Asser, who would become your close friend tutor and eventually your biographer. Historians still argue about the true extent of the devastation. Were things really as bad as you later painted them? Or was this a clever piece of political rhetoric deliberately exaggerating the ruin you inherited in order to make your eventual accomplishments seem all the more miraculous? Whatever the truth, your perception was your reality. You saw a kingdom on the brink of cultural and spiritual collapse, and you took the responsibility for fixing it squarely onto your own shoulders. The immediate threat of Guthrum's axe has been replaced by the more insidious threat of decay. The sucky part is there's no single battle to win this war. It's a fight that will be waged line by line, in a manuscript, coin by coin, in a new currency, and soul by soul in a rebuilt church. You are no longer a guerrilla in a swamp. You are now the master builder, and before you lies a kingdom in pieces waiting for you to figure out how to put it all back together again. The peace you have forged with Guthrum is holding, but you are a man permanently scarred by experience. You cannot forget the terror of the winter invasion, the helplessness of being a fugitive in your own kingdom. You lie awake at night, the memory of the cold Somerset mud clinging to you, and you are obsessed with one single overriding thought: never again. You know that Guthrum's Vikings are not the only Vikings in the world. The sea is still full of longships, and your kingdom, even in its recovery, is still a tempting target. Peace is not a permanent state. It is merely a temporary absence of war. You need insurance, and you decide to build it yourself out of earth timber and sheer force of will. You analyze your past failures with the cold eye of a scholar. Why did Wessex collapse so quickly in 878? Because the Vikings moved faster than you could gather your army. Because your kingdom was soft, with no permanent strongholds for people to flee to or for soldiers to fight from. Your solution is one of the most ambitious and transformative infrastructure projects of the entire early medieval period. You will create a kingdom-wide, systematic network of fortifications. You will build a new, harder Wessex. The project is centered on the creation of more than 30 burghs, or fortified towns. This burgle system is a mainstream historical fact and perhaps your most enduring legacy. The concept is revolutionary in its scope. You plan it so that no farm or village in Wessex is more than 20 miles, roughly a day's journey from the safety of a boor. The next time the warning horns blow, your people will not be caught helpless in their fields. They will have a nearby refuge to run to a place with strong walls, a deep ditch, and a permanent garrison of soldiers ready to defend them. These burghs are to be the backbone of your new defense-in-depth strategy. They are both shields to protect your people and bases from which your mobile army can sally forth to hunt down any invaders who do get through. This isn't a vague plan scribbled on a napkin. A surviving document from your era, the Burgle Hidage, lays it all out with breathtaking precision. It lists each burgh from Winchester to Wallingford and calculates exactly how many hundreds of men are needed to defend its walls based on a simple but effective formula: 4 men for every 5.5 yards of rampart. It's an act of meticulous central planning that feels almost modern in its detail, like something a 9th century spreadsheet wizard would create. This brilliant life-saving plan has just one tiny drawback: everyone hates it. This is the great burr den of your kingship. The project is colossally expensive. Building and refurbishing over 30 fortresses requires a river of silver, and your kingdom is still recovering from being bled dry. This means taxes, heavy taxes. You have to squeeze your nobles and landowners who are already struggling to rebuild their own estates. They complain endlessly about the cost. Then there's the labor. The great earthen ramparts and deep ditches don't dig themselves. You have to conscript thousands of your subjects, forcing them to leave their own farms for weeks at a time to perform this back-breaking, unpaid national service. The grumbling is incessant. You are trying to save your people from future Viking attacks, and they are treating you like a tyrannical project manager with an impossible deadline. They just don't see the point of all this hard work when there are no Vikings currently burning their houses down. This leads to the quirky tidbit that reveals your genius as a planner. The burghs were not just designed as grim military forts. You understood that for the system to work, the forts had to be living places. You designed many of them as new towns laid out on a logical grid pattern with a main street for a market. This dual purpose was brilliant. By making them safe centers for trade and craft, you encouraged people to actually live there permanently. This meant the towns had their own economy and a population ready to defend their new homes and businesses. Many of England's most historic towns, Oxford, Wareham, Cricklade, still bear the imprint of the street plan you gave them. Historians still argue about how much of this system was a completely new invention. Were you a revolutionary military architect, or a brilliant synthesizer who took older Roman and Mercian ideas and perfected them on an unprecedented scale? Either way, you pushed the project through with relentless determination, ignoring the complaints and the cost. You stand on the muddy, half-finished rampart of a new boor, the wind whipping at your cloak. Below you, hundreds of men are hauling timber and shifting earth, their backs aching, their faces sullen. They may resent the work now, but you know that these walls of dirt and wood are the foundations of a secure future. You are building a new Wessex, one that doesn't just pray for peace, but prepares for war. It's an exhausting, unpopular, and crushingly expensive task. But the next time the longships appear on the horizon, you will be ready for them, and that for you is worth any price. Your network of burrs is taking shape, a series of strong points rising from the soil of Wessex. But a fortress is just a wall of dirt without soldiers to man it, and this creates another monumental headache. Your old army, the Fyrd, was essentially a part-time militia. The land-owning nobles and their followers were obligated to serve, but only for a limited period, maybe 40 or 60 days a year. After their time was up, they went home. They had crops to harvest after all. This was the very weakness Guthrum exploited with his winter attack. You can't garrison 30 permanent forts with an army that clocks out every 2 months to go deal with the harvest. The entire defensive system will collapse. Your solution is as brilliantly simple as it is socially disruptive. You decide to split the Fyrd in two. This major reform is a well-established mainstream historical fact and the engine that powered your new military machine. From now on, at any given time, 1/2 of your eligible fighting men will be on active duty, manning the burrs and forming a mobile field army. The other half will be at home, tending the farms, running the economy, and acting as a ready reserve. Then, after a set term, they switch. The men from the farms march off to war, and the men from the garrisons return to the fields. It's a revolutionary system of national rotation. For the first time, it gives you a standing, professional-ish army. You always have a force ready to fight, and your burrs are never empty. Crucially, your kingdom's agriculture doesn't grind to a halt. It is a sustainable, perpetual war footing. Naturally, this is also deeply unpopular. You have effectively doubled the military burden on your people. Before, military service was a temporary crisis measure. Now, it is a permanent, predictable feature of life. Every able-bodied man knows that for half the year, every year, he will be called away from his home and family to serve in a fort or march with the army. It's a huge sacrifice. The grumbling that started with the burr building now becomes a constant low-level hum of resentment. The price for the security you are offering is constant vigilance and constant service. It's another reason why being you, the great reformer and savior, kind of sucks. Your brilliant solutions make everyone's lives harder, even as they make them safer. But even this isn't enough for you. The burrs and the reformed army are reactive measures. They are designed to defeat the Vikings once they have already landed. You stare out at the sea, the great gray highway that always brings the dragon ships, and you have another radical thought. Why are you always fighting them in your house? Why not meet them on the front path? Wessex needs a navy. So, in your spare time between reforming the military, rebuilding the education system, and running the country, you decide to become a naval architect. This quirky and fascinating tidbit comes directly from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the great historical record written under your patronage. The Chronicle proudly states that you ordered the construction of a new kind of warship of your own design. These were not just copies of Viking longships. Your ships were, it claims, full nigh, twice as long as the others, both swifter and steadier, and also higher. They were behemoths, some with 60 oars or more, designed to physically dominate the smaller, more nimble Viking craft. You reasoned that you could beat them by building a bigger, better boat. Historians still argue about how effective your new navy truly was. Was it the game-changing force the Chronicle claims, or more of a coastal patrol whose successes were, let's say, creatively enhanced for the history books? The truth is, your new navy has a clumsy start. You can design a ship, but you can't instantly create generations of seafaring experience. Your West Saxon farmers turned sailors are pitted against men who were practically born on the water. Some of your first naval engagements are borderline comical. In one famous encounter, your fleet traps a handful of Viking ships in a river estuary, but your inexperienced captains run their brand new extra-large ships aground on a falling tide. The battle devolves into a bizarre land fight on the exposed muddy riverbed between the two sets of stranded crews. The Wessex Naval Academy, it seems, is still working out a few kinks in the curriculum. Despite the teething problems, you now have a complete integrated three-layered defense system. The Navy is your early warning system and first line of defense at sea. The network of burrs is your static defense, the shield of the kingdom protecting your people and your resources. And the reformed rotating fyrd is your mobile strike force, the sword that can hunt down and destroy any enemy who manages to get ashore. It is a comprehensive military strategy, engineered from the ground up, born directly from the bitter lessons of your own failures. It has been a burdensome, expensive, and often unpopular process, but you have fundamentally transformed your kingdom from a soft target into a military fortress. You have done it. You have built the walls, reformed the army, and launched the ships. Your kingdom of Wessex is now a fortress, a place of comparative safety in a violent world. For most kings, this would be victory enough. They would lean back, enjoy the peace, and perhaps go on a nice long boar hunt. But you are not most kings. You look at your secure kingdom, and you see a patient who has been stabilized in the emergency room, the bleeding has stopped, but the soul is still sick. You remain haunted by the conviction that the Viking invasions were a divine punishment for the ignorance of your people. Real lasting security will not come from shield walls, but from wisdom. And so, you embark on the most personal and perhaps most arduous battle of your life, the war against ignorance. The problem, as you see it, is one of language. The great storehouse of Christian knowledge and classical wisdom is locked away in Latin. But Latin is a dead language in your kingdom. Your priests stumble through it, your nobles ignore it, and your people have never heard it. It's as if the cure for the world's ills exists, but it's written in an alien tongue that no one can decipher. Your small team of imported scholars can read it, but they are a tiny island of learning in a vast sea of illiteracy. This is not enough. You need to get this knowledge out of the ivory tower and into the halls and homesteads of Wessex. You arrive at a solution so radical for its time that it's almost breathtaking. If the people cannot be brought to Latin, then Latin must be brought to the people. You will personally oversee a grand project to translate the most important books into Old English, the language that everyone actually speaks. This is the great educational program that becomes the obsession of your later reign, a mainstream historical fact that sets you apart from nearly every other European ruler of your time. And you are not just the project's wealthy patron. You are its heart and soul, its translator-in-chief. First, however, you have a personal hurdle to overcome. You, the king, are not fluent in the language of scholarship. So in your late 30s, at an age when most warrior nobles are thinking about their legacy, you go back to school. You sit with your Welsh friend and Bishop Asser, and you force yourself to master the complexities of Latin grammar. Imagine the scene: the victor of Eddington, the designer of fleets struggling like a schoolboy with his declensions and conjugations, his brow furrowed in concentration. It is a profound act of humility and determination. Once you have the skills, you assemble your intellectual A-team and begin the real work. You create a kind of translation workshop at court. The process is a collaborative one. Your scholars read the Latin texts, debating their meaning and context, while you, the master of English prose, render the complex thoughts into clear, elegant, and powerful vernacular. You don't choose pulp fiction for this greatest hits collection of translated works. You select a core curriculum for the moral and intellectual recovery of your nation. You translate Pope Gregory the Great's Pastoral Care, a practical manual on how bishops should guide their people, which you see as the essential first step to fixing your broken church. You translate Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, a profound meditation on fate and wisdom, written by a man in a prison cell, a text whose themes of loss and finding meaning in suffering must have resonated deeply with the man who once hid in a swamp. The quirky tidbit here is that you are no mere word-for-word transcriber. You are an author in your own right. You add, you edit, you explain. You write long personal prefaces to the book speaking directly to your readers. In the preface to Pastoral Care, you lay out your entire educational philosophy, famously lamenting the decay of learning. When you translate the dense philosophy of Boethius, you add your own accessible metaphors to clarify the arguments, including your famous image of a king's tools, praying men, fighting men, and working men, each essential to the health of the kingdom. Historians still debate the exact mechanics of your translation process. How much was your own hand versus that of your scholars? But no one doubts that the vision, the passion, and the distinctive authorial voice were yours alone. This work is isolating. While your nobles are feasting, hunting, or practicing their swordplay, you are often alone, hunched over a manuscript by the flickering light of a candle or a tallow lamp. Your eyes strain to see the script. Your old familiar illness gnaws at your gut, a constant painful companion to your lonely intellectual labors. This is the other quieter side of your kingship. It lacks the visceral thrill of battle, but it is a fight nonetheless. You are fighting the slow decay of a culture, one carefully chosen word at a time. It is the loneliest job in Wessex, this quiet struggle to save your people's souls, and you have chosen it for yourself. You are nearing 50 years old. In the violent, short-lived world of the 9th century, you are an old man. Your hair is gray, your body is weary, but your kingdom is strong. The Burrs stand guard over the fields of Wessex. Your ships patrol the coastline. Your son Edward is a grown man and a proven warrior ready to continue your work. The books you so painstakingly translated are being copied and read in the quiet scriptoriums of your rebuilt monasteries. By any measure, you have succeeded. You faced the apocalypse and you won. You can perhaps finally rest. But there is one enemy you have never defeated, one battle you have never won. The fire in your gut, your lifelong agonizing companion, still rages. Your secret suffering is the thread that runs through your entire life, a constant dark counterpoint to your brilliant public career. This is not speculation. It is a heartbreakingly mainstream historical fact recorded in intimate detail by your friend and biographer, Asser. He writes that from the age of 20, you were never free from your illness. Not for a single day. Not for a single hour. It was a shifting, merciless foe. If the sharp stabbing pains receded for a moment, they were replaced by a different kind of misery, or simply by the crippling dread of their inevitable return. Asser tells the poignant story of how it all began in earnest on your wedding day. During the joyous feast, meant to celebrate your union, you were suddenly struck down by an attack so violent and so prolonged it cast a shadow over the rest of your life. You spent years desperately seeking a cure. You prayed at every holy shrine. You exhausted the knowledge of every court physician with their grim poultices and foul-smelling herbal remedies. The quirky and deeply human tidbit that reveals the depth of your despair is a prayer that Asser records. You begged God to help you. You asked him to replace this mysterious internal agony with some other more visible and less disabling disease, any disease, as long as it didn't render you useless. You would have gladly accepted Asser notes even a severe case of the piles or hemorrhoids. Imagine that. You, the great king, on your knees, not praying for victory or wealth, but just for a less agonizing ailment. This constant debilitating pain makes everything you accomplished seem almost superhuman. When you were hiding in the swamps of Athelney, you were not just cold and hungry. You were also fighting excruciating intestinal cramps. When you stood in the shield wall at Eddington for hours, you were doing so while your own body was at war with itself. When you sat for endless hours by candlelight, translating the wisdom of the ancients, you did it through a fog of pain that would have confined most people to their beds. It is one thing to be a warrior king. It is another to be a scholar king. But to be both, while simultaneously enduring a severe, lifelong chronic illness in an age without a single effective painkiller, that is a trial of almost unimaginable fortitude. Historians and medical experts still debate the exact nature of your ailment. Was it Crohn's disease, as many now suspect, given the symptoms of internal pain and remission? Was it another form of inflammatory bowel disease? Or was it indeed a cripplingly severe case of hemorrhoids, as Asser himself mentions as a possibility? Without your body to examine the diagnosis remains a mystery, a final secret you took to your grave. Even in your final years, the world would not let you rest. In the 890s, another large Viking army landed, and you, the old sick king, had to get on your horse and lead the defense one last time. Your new reformed military system was put to the ultimate test, and it held. You saved your kingdom again. But the long grinding campaign must have taken a terrible toll on your fading strength. You finally die in October of 899. The chronicles do not name a cause, but none is needed. After 50 years of fighting invaders, rebuilding a nation, and enduring a body that gave you no peace, you simply wore out. Your life was one of immense, almost ceaseless suffering, but through it all, you never stopped. You never gave in. You endured the fire both within and without, and from its embers, you forged a kingdom. And so your long and difficult day as King Alfred comes to a close. The burdens you carried were so heavy, the pain so constant a shadow that followed you from the feasting hall of your wedding to the quiet of your final moments. But that shadow has passed now, just as the long night of the Viking Age eventually gave way to a new dawn for the land you fought so hard to protect. Feel the weight of that distant struggle begin to lift from your own shoulders, replaced by the gentle pressure of your blanket and the softness of your pillow. The sounds of battle and the scratching of the lonely quill fade into silence, leaving only the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing and the quiet hum of the world around you as it sleeps. There are no more kingdoms to save tonight, no more books to translate, no more pain to endure. There is only this moment of deep and well-deserved peace and enveloping stillness that calms the mind and soothes the body. Let the last vestiges of the story drift away like smoke from a candle and allow yourself to sink into the quiet, comfortable darkness, easing now into a deep and truly sweet dream.